everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Russlaender 100 Memories of Migration Tour preview. As you may have noticed, this session is being recorded. If you do not wish to be visible on the recording, please keep your camera off, but you can keep it on so that everybody can see who's with us tonight. My name is Audrey Voth-Petka, and I have the privilege of owning TourMagination. We have been helping North American Anabaptists learn about their heritage through group tours for more than 50 years. On our tours, Anabaptists have explored their family history in many countries, such as Mexico, Paraguay, and other countries in South America, the Netherlands, Germany, France, Belgium, Switzerland, Poland, Ukraine, and even Uzbekistan. That's an amazing story there. For the Russlaender 100 Memories of Migration Tour, we are pleased to be partnering with a team of representatives from various Canadian Mennonite historical societies. The story of the migration of Russian Mennonites from the Soviet Union to Canada is personal for me. My grandparents immigrated to Manitoba from Noy-Samar, Russia, and from Alexandroville in the mid-1920s. They all came into, two of my grandparents came individually, and one of my grandparents were already married with children. I know many of you are interested in this tour because you also have deep family connections to this story. Why don't you, if you haven't already, post in the chat if you have ancestors who came to Canada from Russia between 1923 and 1929. I know a lot of you have already done that, and you're enjoying looking at what everybody else has put into the chat. Before we go on, I will give you an overview of the evening so that you know what to expect. First, I'm going to introduce you to Ingrid Reeson-Moment. Ingrid will tell you where the idea of this tour came from and her special connection to the Russlaender migration. Then TourMagination's tour developer, Cheryl Gilmore, will walk us through each of the three parts of the tour. This will give you an overview of what will happen in each of the three segments of the tour. We've divided it into three parts. Next, representatives from the Provincial Mennonite Historical Societies will show photos and talk about historical events happening in their province during the tour. We will end the evening with a Q&A. If you have a question, please post it in the chat. That way it will be part of our recording. We may not get through all the questions, but we will try. They're all very important. Okay, so let me introduce you to Ingrid. Ingrid Reeson-Moment is a great-granddaughter of David Taves, who helped organize migration of Mennonites from the Soviet Union to Canada beginning in 1923. Ingrid and her husband, Lothar, have organized church, school, orchestra, band, and choir tours to Europe through their Manitoba-based travel company. Ingrid is currently the language consultant in the River East Transcona School Division in Winnipeg and will be working next year as a bilingual consultant in curriculum and assessment at Manitoba Education. She is a member of First Mennonite Church of Winnipeg and has a long-standing interest in Mennonite history. Now, let me introduce you to Cheryl Gilmore. She is our very knowledgeable travel consultant and has taken on the role of development in the past year. Cheryl has worked tirelessly on the development of this tour. There are many details for a project this size, and she has done a remarkable job. Cheryl will now give us a quick overview of the tour. All right, Cheryl.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We have developed a wonderful program for you for the Russlaender 100 Memories of Migration Tour. I'm going to give you an overview of the tour, then a rep from each provincial Mennonite Historical Society will talk about the historical sites and events happening in their province. Tour 1 of the Russlaender Memories of Migration Tour starts in Quebec City, where the first Mennonites leaving Russia arrived in the summer of 1923. Part 1 is 7 days. Our program begins here in Quebec City on July 6th and will end in Kitchener on July 12th. Upon arrival, check into your hotel and then join one of the walking tours to explore this beautiful historic city. This evening, meet your fellow travelers and tour leaders for a welcome dinner and an overview of the tour. Following breakfast on Friday, July 7th, we will visit the Russlaender landing site at Grosse Isle and recall the families who started their new lives in Canada in the 1920s. This is a full-day excursion where lunch is included. Expect to arrive back at the hotel late afternoon. The remainder of the evening, you will have free time and have a chance to explore. On Saturday, July 8th, following an early breakfast, depart for Montreal by train, where you will be served an early lunch. Upon arrival, check into your hotel, tour the Russlaender landing port and the former CP Rail headquarters at Windsor Station. You'll hear about the CPR's involvement with the Russlaender migration. Also, tour Montreal's Old Town. You will then return to the hotel to prepare for an evening gala dinner sponsored by CPR and with a CPR theme. Hear Russlaender presentations and greetings from dignitaries, including Peter Harder. On Sunday, July 9th, after breakfast, we depart Montreal for Kitchener via Toronto by train. Upon arrival in Kitchener, check into your hotel. This evening, FASPA will be hosted by one of the local Mennonite churches of Swiss origin.
If you want to.
On Monday, July 10th, we will divide it into 2 groups. Both groups will visit the Mennonite Archives of Ontario, Milton Good Library at Conrad Grebel University College, the Woodside Historic Site, which is the birthplace of former Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King, and the Brubaker House, a Mennonite homestead and museum. Groups will converge at Conrad Grebel for a Russian Mennonite lunch. You'll return to the hotel in the late afternoon and choose where to have dinner. This evening, enjoy a multimedia event, including a sängerfest, choirs, readings from historical letters and diaries, a short talk, and photos. An entry fee will cover costs and a donation towards services for refugees or Indigenous people. On Tuesday, July 11th, you'll have options to choose from. You can choose your preferred day trip. Option number 1, you'll have the option to tour the Niagara Peninsula to see Vineland, Virgil, Niagara on the Lake, and Niagara Falls. Option number 2, you can tour Old Order Mennonite country in Waterloo region for a full or half day. Experience the Mennonite story, an interpretive center in St. Jacobs. Also see local Mennonite farms and businesses. On Wednesday, July 12th is the conclusion of part 1. You'll either depart for home or board a train for Winnipeg and the next leg of the Russlaender 100 journey. So part 2 is 9 days, begins on July 12th with a train trip between Toronto and Winnipeg and ends in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan on Thursday, July 20th. During the train trip, you'll enjoy onboard lectures, oral history, hymn sings, and talking with fellow Russlanders and enthusiasts. Attend intriguing lectures at a Russian Mennonite migration conference. On Thursday, July 13th, you'll arrive in Winnipeg in the early evening. You'll check into your hotel to rest or explore the city on your own. How about a visit to the art gallery? On Friday, July 14th, you can attend an academic conference about the Russian Mennonite migration. If you don't attend the conference, you can enjoy a free day exploring Winnipeg. Sites you could visit include unique shops at the Forks or the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. On Saturday evening, July 15th, you will gather with local Mennonites for Singing Our Journey, sängerfest 2023 at the Winnipeg Centennial Concert Hall. On Sunday, July 16th, you will have a day trip to Steinbach, where you'll visit the Mennonite Heritage Village. You'll travel back to Winnipeg, and in the evening, you'll attend a Mennonite theater play with a Russlaender theme. On Monday, July 17th, our group will do a city tour of Winnipeg, stopping at the CPR building, as well as the Mennonite Heritage Archives at the Canadian Mennonite University. Lunch is planned at the Assiniboine Park Pavilion, with some time to explore the Leo Mole Sculpture Garden. You'll return to your hotel, and later this evening, you will take an overnight train to Saskatoon. On Tuesday, July 18th, you'll arrive in Saskatoon late morning, and you'll check into your hotel. After a refreshing free afternoon, enjoy a performance of the Mennonite Piano Concerto with the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra. Wednesday, July 19th, take a short coach ride to Russlaender for a day that is certain to be a highlight on the migration reenactment. This full day includes a visit to the Station Arts Center, which is located next to the railway where immigrants detrained in 1923. Attend the formal opening of a photograph exhibition of Mennonites who arrived in 1923 and see their early experiences. We will also make brief stops at Reverend David Tave's gravesite, the Old German English Academy, the Anabaptist Center, and Russlaender Junior College. Part 2 concludes on Thursday, July 20th. Today, either depart for home or continue on the final leg of the Russlaender 100 journey as you board a coach for Edmonton. Part 3 is a 6-day tour from Saskatoon to Abbotsford, July 20th to 25th. On July 20th in the morning, you'll board a bus in Saskatoon for the Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Village just east of Edmonton. You'll participate in a tour of the village, followed by a full course Ukrainian dinner and entertainment. Afterwards, travel to Red Deer to spend the night. On Friday, July 21st, you have a full day. You'll proceed to Berchdal Mennonite Church, Didsbury for Russlaender stories, and to view an interactive map of Mennonite churches in Alberta. After lunch, travel to Evergreen Farms in Linden to learn about Mennonite Haldeman history in the area and to enjoy entertainment by a cowboy poet. After a Western barbecue supper, the bus returns to Edmonton to meet a late evening overnight train to Abbotsford, which is actually Vancouver. Saturday, July 22nd, you're going to wake up to a day of incredible scenery through the Rocky Mountains. Enjoy more expert talks, music, and conversation on the train. On Sunday, July 23rd, you'll arrive in Vancouver in the early morning, well rested, and you'll be transferred to Abbotsford. In the afternoon, you will visit Yarrow, Greendale, and Arnold, the 3 earliest Mennonite settlements in the Fraser Valley. You'll tour a Russlaender village and its museum. On Monday, July 24th, we will visit the Hofsbarn to remember historic Mennonite homes in the area, followed by lunch. Then reminisce at a farewell dinner and sing your heart out one last time at sängerfests at a local Mennonite Brethren church. On Tuesday, July 25th, concludes your journey across Canada. You'll exchange photos and email addresses over breakfast. You'll depart for home after honoring your ancestors by remembering their hardships and their faith. I want to say a tremendous effort has been made from all provincial historical committees to produce these programs. It is very impressive. Moving forward tonight, I want to introduce Luc Martin, who's the representative from Quebec, as he will be highlighting the Quebec portion of the tour. Each of the committee members will follow with their presentations in sequence going west.
Now, Cheryl, before Luke speaks, Ingrid is just going to give us a vision of the tour.
Oh, sure.
Here. Can you all hear me? Okay, my name is Ingrid Riesen-Molman, and I am the Vice Chair of the Russlaender Centenary Committee, a subcommittee of the Mennonite Historical Society of Canada. I'm here to tell you about an opportunity to take one of the world's great train rides clear across the country from Quebec City to Vancouver while exploring our Russian Mennonite heritage. In conjunction with Provincial Mennonite Historical Societies and TourMagination, we are planning a 3-part tour in July 2023, which will retrace the historic migration of some 21,000 Mennonites from Russia to Canada between 1923 and 30. These immigrants, known as the Russlaender, were anxious to leave a post-revolutionary Russia beset with civil war, famine, and anarchy. With the help of Mennonites already established in Canada, they found new homes here in the 1920s. Our tour celebrates the faith of these newcomers memorializes the challenges of resettlement, and acknowledges race and displacement in Canadian history. For me, the story behind this great journey is deeply personal. Coincidentally, it began on this very day, 8 years ago, when my father, David Reason, drew his last breath. Just before he died, he asked me to organize an event to commemorate the Russlaender migration to Canada. My dad, as Audrey mentioned, was a grandson of David Taves, a central figure in this migration story. Together with a number of deeply committed members of the Mennonite Board of Colonization, Opa Taves helped to persuade Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King to let our people into Canada, negotiated with the CPR to transport the immigrants, and personally signed the travel debt of all those unable to pay for their journey. For the rest of his life, he collected the travel debt, or reiseschuld, which was finally repaid in full 6 months before he died. To say that this story had an impact on the Taves family is an understatement. Not all of the Canadian Mennonites were in agreement with such a massive undertaking just after the trials of the First World War. And of course, it was the Canadian Mennonites who had to take the Russlaender in by sponsoring them family by family, much as we do with refugees today. And yet, despite seemingly insurmountable odds, David Taves and the Board of Colonization persisted, saving 21,000 people, including my mother's entire family, both sides, from Civil War, anarchists, and starvation, not to mention the horrors of Stalinist Russia, which were still to come. What motivated my great-grandfather is an interesting story in and of itself. The way my dad told it, David Taves was driven to help the Russlaender because he was a member of an ill-fated great trek himself to Central Asia with a group of millennialists under the leadership of Klaus Epp and his own father, Jakob Taves, who believed the second coming would be in Turkestan. Their disastrous journey, which saw many of their number die of starvation, marked a young David Taves for the rest of his life. He knew about starvation and that it didn't wait for politics or savings plans. He was deeply grateful for his new start in North America, and he wanted to share his good fortune with his struggling Russlaender brothers and sisters. But I digress. Back to my father and his dying wish. David Reason wanted Russian Mennonites to remember their history in an age that tends to trivialize or even forget it. He raised me to know, understand, and be grateful for that history. And he firmly believed that all peoples needed to know where they came from in order to flourish. He often drew comparisons between Mennonites and First Nations peoples, whom he saw as having been robbed of their history, languages, and traditions, with disastrous consequences. At his request, I promised to find a way to make us all remember the miracle of this migration and to pay our good fortune forward in donations to the MCC for Ukrainians living through times of war for the third time in a century, for current refugees from all over the world, and for Indigenous peoples displaced by our displacement. It took me a year to come up with the idea of a great train trip retracing the coming of the Russlaender. Then it took a great deal of work by a great many people at various universities, archives, museums, TourMagination, the MCC, and the Mennonite Historical Societies of Canada and all the provinces from Quebec to British Columbia. With your participation, we hope to take a great trek across the country and the decades to remind each other of who we are, from where we come, and what that means today. It is my hope that you will join me on this journey and on that train. Thank you.
Luke, if you want to begin.
Yes, I'm touched, Ingrid, that it just touched me some. I wanted to come in with a more joyous intro, but thank you, Ingrid. Bienvenue à Québec et bienvenue à Montréal. I'm Luke Martin, and I'm a member of the Société d'Histoire Mennonite du Québec. There's not much history of the Russlaender migration apart from a stop, I guess, going by Montreal and taking the train. But we will try to dig out to see if there was a Russlander that hopped off the train in Quebec City or Montreal, who knows? And we do know that some did come back And we would like to present at the banquet a few biographies of people that from the descendant. No, even we know of one Russlaender that came back as a young adult who came and settled in Montreal, and we'll tell you that story. And we'll tell you stories of descendants that have had some impact in the Mennonite community in Montreal and Quebec, and also some others. So we'd like to present that during the banquet. So that'll be our small contribution to this trek. It will be at the Queen Elizabeth that we're having the banquet. Very historical place.
If you don't mind my interjecting, I'm just going to add that we went to the CPR for a donation, a sponsorship for this banquet, and we got it to our delight. And we will be joined here by Senator Peter Harder, who will have some things to say about his family's migration.
Thank you, Luke. Harold, would you like to continue?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Harold Thiessen of Toronto, originally from St. Catharines, Ontario. The Thiessen side of my family hails from the village of Klippenfeld in the Molucna colony. Unfortunately, my family did not make it in the 1920s, so suffered through Stalin's Russia and World War II, not arriving in Canada until the early 1950s. Although one of my more well-known relatives, J.J. Thiessen of Saskatchewan, my grandfather's brother, he made it in 1926. Over my life, I've developed a strong interest in Russian Mennonite history, and I currently serve as the Secretary of the Mennonite Historical Society of Ontario, based at Conrad Grebel University College in Waterloo, and I'm on the Ontario Committee for this Russlaender 100 project. Now, in terms of introduction, the first 1920s Mennonite migrants from Russia, Soviet Union, arrived in Canada in 1923 and proceeded to settle in the West. In 1924, a second group of 5,000 arrived at Quebec City, and of this number, approximately 1,500 were settled in Ontario, the bulk arriving in Waterloo on July 19, 1924. Eventually, many of these Mennonites moved on to the Niagara Peninsula and also southwestern Ontario, Leamington, Kingsville, and Harrow. Now you're going to arrive, or the participants of the tour are going to arrive in the evening on the first day, and they will be hosted by the congregation at the Waterloo-Kitchener United Mennonite Church for a welcome FASPA. So that should be a very nice welcome. On the next day, the tour will divide into two groups. Both groups, in reverse order, will visit the Mennonite Archives of Ontario and the Milton Good Library at Conrad Grebel University College to view specific Russlaender exhibits and see the descendant of the Kortitsa Old Oak on the Grebel grounds. Then the tour groups will go to the Woodside Historic Site, the childhood home of former Prime Minister Mackenzie King, who was instrumental in allowing for the 1920s migration to Canada. The group will also visit the historic Brubacher House, a Swiss Mennonite homestead and museum. Additional sites could include the path of the Russian Mennonite immigrants from the train station to Herb Street Mennonite Church to meet their billets, Swiss Mennonite churches that hosted Russlanders, and the MCC Ontario headquarters and thrift store at 50 Kent Street. Finally, groups will converge at Conrad Grebel for a Mennonite-themed lunch. In the evening, tour group members will enjoy a multimedia event, including the premiere of a choir commission composed by Leonard Entz, former music professor at Conrad Grebel College, some hymn singing, readings from historical letters and diaries, and a short historical address. On the third day, participants can choose their preferred day trip. The first option is to go to the Niagara Peninsula. This will be a tour of the Niagara Peninsula to see Vineland, Virgil, Niagara Lake, and Niagara Falls. The tour will include an on-the-way orientation as to how, when, and why Mennonites first came to Ontario, largely from the United States, starting in the 1700s, and how these Mennonites assisted Russian Mennonites in both the 1870s and 1920s migrations. In Vineland, the 1924 immigrants were welcomed and hosted by the Moyer Mennonite Church, now called the First Mennonite Church, as it is in fact the oldest Mennonite congregation in Canada. The tour will visit this church, its historic Mennonite burial ground, and the bicentennial monument erected in 1986 to commemorate 200 years of Mennonites in Canada. The tour will highlight Russlaender arrivals, first farms purchased by the immigrants, local industries and farms which employed the Russlaender Mennonites, the Vineland United Mennonite Church, and the neighboring home for the aged, and the site of the Coop Sisters obstetrical nursing home. The tour will also feature stories of immigration provided by the descendants of local families. Lunch will be provided at the Niagara United Mennonite Church in the farming community of Virgil. The afternoon will further trace the expansion of Russlaender settlement through the Niagara Peninsula as it travels through the scenic Niagara wine country, St. Catharines, and Niagara-on-the-Lake. Again, local churches, farms, industries where new Russlaender immigrants found employment will be highlighted. The tour will also include a stop at the Palatine Winery, owned by descendants of Russlaender Mennonites, as well as a brief stop to view Niagara Falls. Now, the second option on that day would be a tour of Old Order Mennonite country. This tour will track through the Waterloo region. It'll feature a stop at the Mennonite Story, an interpretive center in St. Jacobs, Ontario, and a tour through the Old Order areas with local guides. Attention will focus on local farms and businesses who hosted Russlaender when they arrived. Sites may be included on the tour are the historic Westmont Roads Covered Bridge, historic Mennonite businesses such as Wallenstein Feed and General Store, and Brubacher Harness. Lunch plans include Anna Bay's restaurant in Millbank. Then in that day, both groups will return to their hotel in the late afternoon or early evening. Currently, there are no planned events for this evening except relaxation and rest as the train ride to Winnipeg is on for the next day. Thanks.
I think it's back to me now. I'm working with the Manitoba group on what we're going to do in Manitoba. And of course, the first thing you have to do is take a long train trip from Toronto to Winnipeg. And what we've thought of for that particular time is that you will have a number of historical lectures provided by Dr. Aileen Friesen and Dr. Henry Patekow. We'll be having Richard Thiessen on hand to explore genealogy, and you can do some of that work in advance. He's a fountain of knowledge, Richard, over there in Abbotsford, and he's willing to work with you to do your own historical research about which boat, who came on, and which families came when. When we arrive, we'll be doing some oral histories on the train as well, and family stories, which we will exchange with fellow travelers. And when we will arrive, we will be making a little trip to the CPR station, not Union Station, where the train goes through right now, just to see how it was when the first people came through in 1923 and 1924. And I probably should say that my maternal grandmother came in 23. On her way to Edmonton. They had a billet in Edmonton, and one part of the family remained in Winnipeg. So they only lasted in Edmonton for 1 year, and then they came back to Winnipeg, which frequently happened. I think people were billeted and then they found each other in family groups again. My maternal grandfather came the following year in 24, and they were actually headed somewhere completely different. But ended up being hauled off the train by their relatives in Winnipeg who'd come in 23. So they all ended up in the same place, and that seems to be a fairly typical pattern. One of the biggest things we're doing in Manitoba right at the beginning is we're having an international academic conference at the University of Winnipeg on the subject of the Russlaender migration. So there will be a great many aspects of this migration taking place. And that will be sponsored by Mennonite Studies at the University of Winnipeg. And we look forward to some very interesting contributions at that point. There is also, of course, a lot of things to do in Winnipeg downtown. We will be staying at the Fort Garry Hotel, which is very closely located to the Forks and some very other interesting sites in downtown Winnipeg. So for people who are not so academically inclined, there are other possibilities. When we get to Saturday evening, July 16th, We have a huge sängerfest planned at the Centennial Concert Hall for something we've called Singing Our Journey, Sängerfest 2023. And this will feature MC Eric Friesen, whom you all know from the CBC, soloists Philip Entz from Germany and Andrea Lett, as well as adult, youth, and treble choirs conducted by our own Henry Engbrecht, Crystal Peters, Victor Pankratz, and Millie Hildebrand. The concert is going to close with a mass choir singing a finale composed by Leonard Entz on the theme Nun danket alle Gott. And that's already been composed and people are already working on practicing it. And I think another feature of this Sängerfest, which will be a highlight of our trip, is that we have a number of wealthy Manitobans who've sponsored this evening. There is obviously no ticket charge, and our appeal will be to people to think about the MCC and paying it forward to the causes I was talking about earlier tonight. On a Sunday morning, as was mentioned, we're going to take a trip to Steinbach to visit a Russlaender exhibit at the Mennonite Heritage Village there. And we're also going to enjoy a traditional German church service and also a wonderful lunch at the cafeteria there at the restaurant there, which is all at the same Heritage Village. When we get back into town in the evening, Winnipeg Mennonite Theatre will be putting on a play on a Russlaender theme. And the reason we can't tell you which play is because they're having a competition, actually, and they've solicited contributions from playwrights of all sorts on this theme, and they will be having that judged and juried by a very sophisticated panel. And so you will be seeing sort of the best of the best that evening. They usually use the St. Boniface University stage as their home stage. Then on Monday, you'll be visiting the Forks. We do have a fantastic Museum of Human Rights in Manitoba, in Winnipeg right now, that is worth a visit. And in addition to that, of course, we'll want to check out the Mennonite Heritage Archives, which contains all the Board of Colonization papers. So it's a very interesting place for this particular focus. And I'm looking forward to that myself. Our lunch at Assiniboine Park and visit to Leo Mall Gardens will conclude the Manitoba part of this tour. And in the evening, we will be taking a night train to Saskatoon for the wonders of Saskatchewan. And I'm going to turn it over to Jake.
Jake, can you unmute yourself, please?
My name is Jake Bueller. Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you, Jake. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm connected with the Mennonite Historical Society of Saskatchewan, which is hosting the Saskatchewan portion. My connection to the Russlaender story begins with Maria Pauls, who would one day become my mother. She was born in Grigorivka, south of Kharkiv in 1907. By 1918, her parents had died of the pandemic and she was adopted by her younger grandparents. As a teenager, she was in love with Bernhard Bueller, who would much later become my father. But the revolution intervened, and in 1925, she made her way unaccompanied as a teenager with her younger brother Jacob, then age 11, to Canada, to be put onto an old colony Mennonite farm at Osier, Saskatchewan. As things would have it, she fell in love with her boss, who was 15 years her senior, and they married when she was 19. To this marriage were born Leo, Otto, and Irvin Dreger. Then a kidney ailment took the life of Cornelius Dreger, and Maria was a widow. Meanwhile, my Bernhard Bueller came to Manitoba and remained a bachelor living with his mother. When he heard that his erstwhile sweetheart was a widow, he wrote a love letter to her, and 3 months later they married, and a year after that I was born. So we have a bit of drama, and the two wedding pictures over here indicate my mother in her first marriage and my mother in her second marriage. As I indicated, I was born to that second group, and there were other siblings, Ruth, Wilfred, and Ben. You will land in Saskatoon on the morning of July 18th at the Saskatoon train station, and you will make your way immediately to the Besborough Hotel, at least that's what we used to call it, a railway hotel built in 1929, and the only famous railway hotel that didn't open after it was completed because of the dirty 30s. Then on the morning of the next day, yes, the evening of the first day when you arrive, you will be treated to twin grand piano concerto by Godwin Friesen and Jerry Hugh, who will do Victor Davies' Mennonite piano concerto. That will be on the evening of the first day that you arrive. The next morning, you will make your way to Russlaender. En route, you will stop for 10 minutes or so at the oldest, first established Old Colony Mennonite village at Noyanlaki, shown on the left, 1944 aerial photograph. And it was a story that is not told very often, is the role of the Old Colony Mennonites who hosted hundreds and hundreds of Russlaender as they landed in Saskatchewan. This is one home that hosted many Russlaender located en route to Russlaender. We will stop for a brief time to visit the burial sites of David and Marguerite Taves, which is in the Russlaender Cemetery as we enter the town. We will next go to the Station Arts Theatre, which is located exactly where the Russlaender landed in 1923. We will have a small ceremony on the same platform that they landed on. And then we will go indoors to see a wonderful photographic exhibition that Aileen Friesen is putting together. We will then go to the next slide to visit the German English Academy shown in the picture with the brick or the brick building. It is now the museum, and there we will see the David Taves exhibition. On the left side is the original Mennonite Church of Saskatchewan, or the original Mennonite church at Russlaender. We will have lunch at RJC, after which we will go to visit the Stony Hill location, which is where Mennonites and First Nations have for almost 50 years, make it 45 years, cooperated together to try to remember the wrongs that were done to them, especially after Reserve 107 was canceled and the land was given to Mennonites and the Lutherans without the Mennonites and the Lutherans knowing that it once had been an Indian reservations, at least then called Indian Reservation. We will have a small ceremony there, after which we will take the bus back to Saskatoon. And the next morning, the journey will continue on to Alberta.
Good evening.
Get unmuted.
I'm Katie Harder, Chair of the Mennonite Historical Society of Alberta. History has always fascinated me, and I've always been drawn to the story of my forefathers in Russia. I feel that it is of vital importance that our children and grandchildren understand the stories of our Mennonite faith and have the opportunity to hear both the good and the bad events that our loved ones experienced while living in Russia. Both of my parents were Russlaender, and when my mother and dad immigrated to Canada in 1926, my mother was the only one of her family of 8 children, plus parents, to leave Russia. The rest of her family remained behind. It was in the mid-1950s when our family received a phone call from my mom's sister. She was calling from Russia. It was a momentous and exciting occasion. I still remember the tears of joy my mother shed when she found out by telephone that she still had 3 siblings with families alive in Russia. The letter writing once more resumed, and parcels were sent to help the family. Thereafter, trips were made back and forth to the homeland, and several of my siblings traveled to Russia later to visit the family. Today, children and grandchildren of those that remained behind in Russia now reside in Germany, and visits have been made back and forth to Canada and to Germany. Alberta Bound, loosely based on the lyrics of Gordon Lightfoot. I'm Alberta bound, this piece of heaven that I've found. Rocky mountains and black fertile ground, everything I need under heaven's big blue sky. It's a pride that's been passed down to me, deep as oil wells and wide as a farmer's field. Yeah, I've got independence in my veins. Maybe it's my down-home ornery ways and these dusty old Alberta cowboy boots that resemble a chinook wind that's keep coming back. I'm Alberta bound. Come with me on a mini tour of the incredible places you'll see when you participate in the Russlaender 2023 Centenary Tour. Alberta is the second last province that you will visit on the tour. It's known for its oil, hockey, cowboy culture, and beautiful prairie sunrises and sunsets and wide open spaces. The first Albertans were the Indigenous people, who together with the settlers and the immigrants that have moved into the province have formed relationships that have evolved during the decades of oil, natural gas, and oil sands development across the province. The Indigenous people of Alberta are a proud people who willingly participate in setting the framework for land resource management and development, ensuring that effective relationships and open consultations continue to happen with Albertans. The first venue that you will visit upon arriving in Alberta is the Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Village, east of Alberta's capital city of Edmonton. Although the majority of Mennonites now residing in Alberta were born in Canada, most families have ties to the Ukraine. And over the last few months of the war, these ties have been fostered due to our shared heritage. It is in the Ukraine that Mennonites enjoyed some of their greatest prosperity and endured some of their worst suffering. At the Ukrainian village, you will have the opportunity to do a walkabout tour, enjoy Ukrainian entertainment and culture, participate in a Ukrainian dinner, and enjoy interactive conversation with a Ukrainian historian and with our own Mennonite historian, Dr. Colin Neufeld from Edmonton. The first venue the following day will be spelled at the Burkeville Mennonite Church east of Didsbury. The Mennonites in this area came to Didsbury from the Burkeville colony in Manitoba and settled in the area in 1901. In 1903, they established the Mennonite Church, which is the oldest Mennonite church in the province. This event was commemorated in 2003 with the 100-year centenary plaque from Mountain View County. The church is a lovely, well-designed structure in a picturesque rural setting with beautiful grounds for having a picnic, playing baseball, a children's playground, and an outdoor kitchen. Here we will enjoy a noon lunch while listening to heritage songs or canlieder being played by a local accomplished pianist, then a local descendant from the 1901 Mennonite settlers who hosted the Russlaender families will share sponsorship stories. This will be followed by an interactive map presentation of the original Mennonite settlements in Alberta, by Alberta's former MCC Director, Abe Jansen. The last stop will be at the Evergreens Farms in Linden. In the Linden area, the Russlaender Mennonites from the 1920s were hosted by the Haldeman community. In 1902, several Haldeman families had originally settled in the Linden area after coming from Oregon in search of cheap land. At the C.C. Taves original farm homestead, you will be served barbecue supper in a restored barn. This family was and is still known for their generosity in giving back to the community whenever the needs arise. Today, the land is planted and harvested for the Food Grains Bank, and every year the farm hosts a supper to celebrate the harvest, and additional monetary funds are raised to further the cause of the Food Grains Bank. Doris Daly, cowboy poet who attends the Mennonite Church in Okotoks, will entertain the group with cowboy poetry, and we will once again listen to sponsorship stories about the Haldeman community hosting the Russlaender Mennonites. It is interesting to note that in both of these sponsorship stories, romance and intermarriage happen between the families. From here, the tour will return to Edmonton to embark on a train trip to the Fraser Valley. The Mennonite Historical Society of Alberta is excited to be able to partner with TourMagination for this commemorative cross-country tour, and we hope that you will consider joining us. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Richard Thiessen, and I am representing the Mennonite Historical Society of British Columbia. My personal connection to the Russlaender story goes back to 1926, when my mother's parents, Peter and Anna Esau, emigrated from the Mennonite settlement of Orenburg to Canada. They settled in Saskatchewan, moved to Manitoba, and then arrived here in the Fraser Valley in 1943. So when you arrive here in Abbotsford, we will make our way east and we will cross the Sumas Prairie, which 100 years ago was actually the Sumas Lake. And that lake was drained in 1924, and that made it possible for many from the prairies to come over to the Fraser Valley. They were enticed by the new farmland that they were able to work. And so when we cross that Sumas Prairie, we will visit 3 of the original Russlaender settlements in the Fraser Valley. We will visit Yarrow, Greendale, and Arnold. And you'll see where these early settlements were established. You'll see the land that was transformed from being a lake to being a farmland, where the early settlers were able to earn money by picking hops and picking tobacco. We'll see some of those areas, and we will also learn about the raspberries that many of these Mennonites planted and picked every summer. After we've traveled through the eastern part of the valley, we'll make our way back to the Abbotsford area, and we will learn about the settlement of Clearbrook that was established by the Russlaender. And we will learn that when they arrived in this area, they had a lot of work to do clearing the stumps that remained from the logging that had taken place in this area. And we will learn how the Mennonites transformed what was very undesirable land. In fact, this area was called Poverty Flats. They transformed this into some of the best farmland in Canada. We will also have an opportunity to visit the Mennonite Heritage Museum, which was established in 2016, and where I have the pleasure of being the director. And we will be able to view the exhibits, which cover the 500-year history of the Anabaptist Mennonite story. We'll also be able to view a new exhibit that we are just finishing up now, which is going to focus on the agricultural activities of Mennonites over 500 years, both in Europe as well as here in the Fraser Valley. You'll enjoy a traditional Mennonite meal with borscht and Mennonite baking, and we be able to view the exhibits. One of the things that we're hoping to do is to meet with the representatives of the Indigenous groups here in the area to mark the draining of the Sumas Lake and to acknowledge the impact that that draining of the lake had on not only the settlers who came from Europe, but also the indigenous people who were here. For the settlers, it was seen as a very positive development. And yet at the same time, for the indigenous people who were here, it was they had a very negative impact on their life. And so we will have an event that will acknowledge that. And then we will finish our time here with another music event, which will feature some of our local Mennonite musicians. So we look forward to hosting you here in 2023.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you to all the committee reps from the provinces. I will repeat what Cheryl has already said. There has been a tremendous amount of work that has gone into the programs that they are going to be offering in each of the provinces. So thank you. And after hearing all of this, who wouldn't want to sign up for part 1, maybe part 2, or maybe all 3 parts of this fabulous tour? If you want to, you could even put in the chat, I intend to register. I want to be part of these tours. In a minute, we will have the Q&A, so please start posting your questions if you haven't already, and the appropriate person will respond. If you are unable, we have extended our time a little bit. If you're not able to stay for the Q&A, here is the link to see where you will be able to hear the recording. Okay. There we go. I hope that Sandra's been able to post that. Something special about this tour that I want to talk about a little bit before everybody leaves is that we are reserving whole train cars with Via Rail for the portions of the tour. In order to reserve these whole cars with Via Rail, we need to pay a certain amount in advance. And that is coming up next month. If you are serious about this tour and you really have intentions of signing, we really encourage you that you should register at your earliest convenience. We are setting a deadline for July 8 with a deposit of $1,500 per person. Now, some of you have already registered with a deposit, and you will be receiving an invoice within the next few days or next week with a payment schedule of what will be due at the same time. This will enable TourMagination to make this very important deposit with Via Rail. And if you want to, also, this information is all listed on our website, TourMagination.com. And if you haven't been to our website, we really encourage you to go there. There's so much information there and everything will be there. All right, let's move to the Q&A.
So Audrey, we have a question about accessibility for people with mobility problems or food allergies. Can you tell us how they will be taken care of?
Cheryl, can you address that issue, please?
Sure. Absolutely. We can accommodate people that have food allergies. We will advise all the hotels. We will take all the information from you and supply this to everyone, every area that we can that will be serving food. When it comes to the trains, we recommend that you do not take a top bunk if you have any kind of mobility challenges, because that might be a little difficult. It is difficult to have a wheelchair on the train, but there is something available if someone is in that kind of condition. But definitely we can do our best to accommodate you. And I suggest that you contact us at TourMagination with your specific needs and we will address them.
Audrey, there's a
Thank-
question about, will there be any reference made to the 1870s migration of Mennonites from Russia?
Could one of the committee members speak to that if that has been included in their program?
Perhaps Ingrid could answer that.
Ingrid, can you unmute, please?
Okay, sorry, could you repeat the question?
Will there be any reference made to the 1870s migration of Mennonites from Russia, or from Russia to Canada?
Well, I think, they were very much part of this story because many of them were hosting the Russlaender when they came. And so in that sense, there's going to be a lot of work done trying to get families together, host families and arriving families, for example. In that sense, all of the groups of Mennonites are very significant to this story. Nobody was really without an impact here. Many people from the first immigrant group were hosting members of this group when they came through. So yes, there will be reference.
That's great. Peter has a question. Will there be anything on the 1920 settlement in Reeser, Ontario? He says his parents homesteaded there from 1930 to 1947. Perhaps Harold could give us some insight on that one.
Yes, I didn't mention anything specifically about Reeser, but yeah, it was an important settlement in Ontario. And I think that I can perhaps speak for the archivist and librarian at Conrad Grable, and that day that we spend at Grable in the archive, I think I can practically guarantee there'll be an exhibit on Reeser. And I hope that doesn't get me into trouble. But it's an important part of the Russlaender settlement in Ontario. So I'm pretty sure that that will be addressed at least on that day.
Great, thank you very much. Dorothy has very helpfully pointed out that on this slide that we showed, we had wrong dates for the Saskatoon to Abbotsford portion of the tour. But we can refer to you'll get a follow-up email with the correct dates on that tour. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. We have a couple more minutes if you want to post anything else in the chat, or you could also contact us directly if you have a question that has not already been answered.
That's right. We will be able to direct you to the appropriate person or be able to answer it ourselves. Okay, so if there aren't any more questions at this point, I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. And I hope you were inspired by what you heard and what we will be able to offer to you on this tour. The Memories of Migration Russlaender 100 tour is a very unique experience. And you will probably discover some long lost cousin or make an acquaintance of someone who shares your family history with you. Please remember, July 8th is an important date to have your registration in with your deposit so that we can continue on with our payments. And please don't wait and be disappointed. We really want this to be a wonderful experience for everyone from coast to coast to coast, as I think that's how CBC says it. We have posted a registration link. You can see that Sandra has posted it there. And in the next few days, you will receive the recording of tonight's presentation. I'm just repeating myself again. So thank you again. And we look forward to traveling with you in 2023. Good night, everyone.